Father God, Lord, thank you for your word. Lord, thank you for this morning where we can gather and celebrate that you came. And Lord, I pray as we dive into this morning's scripture, Lord, that you would encourage us that you've come, and Lord, that you're coming again. And Lord, I pray as we celebrate Christmas as families, as we step away from Thanksgiving, it's just beautiful time of remembering and being thankful for everything you've done. Lord, I pray as we come into Christmas, Lord, that we would not just slide into the secularism of, materialism of Christmas and all the MacBooks that we all want. But Lord, that you would help us be focused on you. Lord, we love you and praise you and thank you for all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so this morning's topic is the art of creation. And this teaching is going to be a lot different than normal, okay? Rather than doing my normal thing of kind of doing a deep dive into a biblical text, which is what we do for the other 48 weeks a year, during these Christmas times, I like to do things a little bit different. And so this morning, I'm going to teach from a synthesis of a whole bunch of different disciplines. It's a synthesis of theology, of science, of natural history, and art. And I find it very fascinating when you start hooking all these things together. Sometimes they teach us things that we don't always get when we're just studying the Bible. In fact, most theologians have two categories of revelation. There's what's called general revelation, which is the world, the creation, the stars, the heavens, everything that you see, and special revelation, the scriptures, what God has inspired and has been passed down for centuries. And so these two big categories. And this morning we're going to look at both together. Okay? And art is one of those things that also kind of weaves these things together in such a way that kind of crosses from the mundane to the sacred. And I think you've experienced that in your own life. Beauty is one of those things that can stop us in our tracks. In fact, I had an experience of that this exact week. Just the other morning, I got a text from my wife. She is the responsible person in our family, getting the kids up, getting them ready for school. I'm laying in bed snoozing like I do. And I get this text. My little phone rings over here, and she says, "You really should see the sunrise." And she was right. It was amazing. Hun, please keep sending me these texts. So I go look out the window, and this is what it looks like. And this screen is not very nice compared to what it actually was, but it was spectacular is the short answer. And it's one of those things, like beauty does that to us, right? It stops us. It like, hey, you should go look at this. Why is that? It's so funny. That same morning, just a couple hours later, I got an email from our 96-year-old Dorothy Redsfield. And do you know what Dorothy was doing at 11 o'clock that morning? She was sending me an email of this. And of course, why was she? Well, she was emailing all of her friends the beautiful sunrise over Mount Rainier from her place. Why do we do that? What would compel a 96-year-old gal to be figuring out how to upload that image to her computer so that she can send it? She has an AOL account. It's kind of funny. Good job, Dorothy. But beauty does that to us. It compels us and demands our attention. And a little fun question. The next time you run into a naturalist, an atheist, someone who doesn't believe in God, ask them, what is the evolutionary advantage of art? I mean, think about that for a second. What is the advantage of art? In fact, we have a little phrase in our culture, right? Of what does an artist like bring home in terms of income and resources, right? They're a starving artist. Right? I mean, that's not an advantage. That's what happens when people pursue art and love art. They do it at their own personal expense. And natural beauty does that to us. It causes our spouse to wake us up too early in the morning. It causes us to send out the message. It makes us point, hey, look at this. It's beautiful. And we experience that all the time. It's very fascinating as we recently have been developing these AI systems, artificial intelligence. You've probably been hearing in the news all the time. You know, one of the first things we did when we started creating this technology, we created AI art systems. Literally one of the first AI systems was AI art. In fact, this is an example of the current state of the art. This is Midjourney version 5. I typed in, hey, sunrise over Mount Rainier, in about 30 seconds, from scratch, not connected to any pre-existing art, it generated this. And got some bad news for all the artists out there. Starving artists is going to be more of a thing in the future as we start creating more and more of these tools because it's not perfect, it's not real. Like that spot doesn't exist, so that's a little rough, but it's beautiful. You know what else I'm afraid of? Not just afraid of the AI taking over the art scene. I'm also afraid of losing the night sky. I don't know if you know this. I grew up out in a very rural area, out in the country, in the middle of nowhere. And whenever it wasn't raining or cloudy, which around here, that's a big caveat. It takes that most of the year. But when it wasn't raining or cloudy, you went outside and looked up at the sky, and it was amazing. There was many, many stars. And but there's light pollution, right? And we can see fewer and fewer stars every passing year because there's more and more lights, and you have to go further and further out. And so we recently bought a place out in the country. And so within the first week of us being there, when it was clear and warm, one evening we went out and laid in the middle of the field and just looked at the stars, and it was nice. Okay, it was real nice. And one of the things that I noticed that I hadn't seen before when we were out there with the kids watching the star field was a Starlink string. Anyone here seen one of the Starlink strings? Okay, a couple of you guys. This is what it looks like. It's going to take a second for this video to load here, but Starlink is a satellite system of internet. In fact, I actually use it in my house because I'm out in the middle of nowhere. But it's a series of 4,000 satellites, and when they launch them in quick succession, and so they pop up like a row of satellites, but they're on a string, like a band of pearls. And so it's a Starlink string, and it's so fascinating. If you look at the history of satellites, things are radically changing. At the beginning of this year, there were 6,718 satellites in space, of which 4,200 of them were Starlinks. And they're launching hundreds of them every month. And the plan is, if all the companies that are trying to build these internet constellations puts them all up, there will be 50,000 satellites in space beaming down internet as well as cell coverage. The next generation of these actually put cell towers on these satellites, and so your phone will work everywhere on the globe when you're outside. Fascinating changes, but I'm a little afraid, right? I'm a little afraid of losing the stars, and other scientists are actually worried about. They're starting to raise the alarm, saying, "Hey, we shouldn't do this. Like this is like too many is too many." Why should we care though? Well, I care because I think this night sky, the stars are profoundly important. And the scriptures say so too. Let me share a psalm with you, Psalm 19. If you have a Bible, let me flip on over there for a moment. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time in this morning, but Psalm 19, take a look at this. King David, he sings or writes this. He says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The sky displays his handiwork. Day after day it speaks out. Night after night it reveals his greatness. There is no actual speech or word, nor is its voice literally heard. Yet its voice echoes throughout the earth. Its words carry to the distant horizon." And what this is saying, you probably can understand it pretty straightforward, right? From the sunrise to the sunset, for the sun, the moon, the stars, everything we see, they're saying something to us if we're listening. They speak about a creator who is an artist. I mean, God could have designed this world in such a way where there was no sunsets or sunrises, but it wouldn't declare his glory like what he did does. And the psalm very clearly says, what is the message of all these things? It says it reveals his greatness. It reveals God's greatness. And when King David was writing the psalm, I'm sure he was simply speaking of the heavens when he went out at night before all the electrical lighting. I'm sure he had a very nice view of the stars. And it was stunning and revealed God's greatness. However, since King David wrote this, we have learned so much more. And this statement that he said, again, poetically speaking of God's greatness, he had no idea how true that statement was. In fact, many of us haven't studied a lot of astronomy. For those of you who don't know, before I was a pastor, I was an engineer and I have a secular science background. In fact, before I was a believer, I was an atheist, and I wanted to be an astronaut. And so I spent a lot of time studying space. So I'm going to give you the quick astronaut's guide to space, okay? Just in case you're not familiar, here's a quick version of what you need to know about space. Welcome, this is Earth. You're on that rock, okay? We have a moon. You probably noticed it's out there. Lately, it's been super, super bright, these beautiful, clear mornings. 240,000 miles away, Well, it's a little ways away, okay? If you took a radio or a beam of light and you flashed it at the moon, it would take 1 second, technically 1.3 seconds, but 1 second to make it to the moon and 1 second to come back. And so if you were playing video games, there'd be some lag, okay? So it's a little ways away, 1.3 seconds. But zoom out a little bit, okay? There's more to our solar system than just the Earth and moon. We have this little thing, the interior solar system. We got a sun. We got planets. Again, we're here on Earth. I don't know, do you know how far away the sun is? 92 million miles, okay? It's a long ways away. It's about 500 light seconds away, eight and a third minutes. So when you look up when the sun comes out here, when it does eventually come back out, you'll look up at the sky, you're seeing light that left the sun 8 minutes and 20 seconds ago. That's how long it takes for the light to travel here, because it's 92 million miles away. If you were poor Mars, life's even rougher. It takes 13 minutes for it to get all the way out there. So they kind of figure out the distance between Earth and Mars, 5 light minutes. So it takes, when they eventually land people on the Mars, we won't know for 5 minutes after they've already done it, because that's how long the signal takes to get here. But zoom out some more, okay? You've heard this, the big planets, the outer solar system, and our poor dear friend Pluto. Pluto's rough. It was a planet, and then it wasn't a planet, and then it was, and then it wasn't. And I was of the generation where Pluto was still a planet. So I missed dear Pluto. And Pluto's orbit is not a circle, it's elongated, such that on Pluto's closest to the sun day, it takes 4 hours for light to make it to Pluto. On the bad time of the year, it takes 11 hours for light to make it to Pluto. It's 3.3 billion miles. So it's a little ways out there, okay? We kind of think, oh, all the planets are nice and ordered. No. The scale is really stretched out. Pluto is much, much further away than, say, Earth, Mars, Venus, the close by ones. But keep zooming out, right? We kind of knew this from school, right? But there's more interesting things. The closest stars. Many of you know the closest star to us, Proxima Centauri or Alpha Centauri. It's about 4 light years away. Right here. My personal close-by star that I like is actually the brightest star in the sky. Anyone know who the brightest star in the sky is? Anyone? Sirius, right? It's from the Greek phrase burning one or bright one. So Sirius, and it's also a very, very close by, which is why it's so bright. It's both a bright star, large giant star, very, very close, 8.6 light years away. So if the moon is 1 second away, the brightest star in the sky, when you look up, it's 8.6 years away by light. But keep zooming out. There's more. You live in the Milky Way. We have no photos of this of the Milky Way because we're in the middle of it. But astronomers, this is not AI art though. Okay, this is a little bit different. Astronomers can measure the distance and location of stars because the Earth is spinning, different observatories on Earth, and the Earth goes around the sun. And so if you think about it, we have multiple angles of measuring things. If you measure all the angles and all the brightnesses and the shift of the light due to the Doppler effect, you can actually locate where stars are in 3-dimensional space. And we've made massive maps and databases and catalogs of many of the stars in the Milky Way. So this is approximately what it looks like, and you can kind of see, we're here on one of these little arms. And so that's the Milky Way. The Milky Way's big, though. Distance across, estimated to be 100,000 light years across. So if the moon is 1 second away, this is 100,000 years across. That's the Milky Way, and approximately 100 billion stars. But you can still zoom out. If you zoom out some more, the most distant object you can see with the naked eye, you know what that is? It's the Andromedan Galaxy. It's the closest large galaxy to us, the Andromedan Galaxy. It is 2.5 million light years away, and you can see it with your bare eye. If you know where to look at night, you can look up, you can see the Andromedan Galaxy, 2.5 million light years away. But you can still keep zooming out. It's the fascinating thing. There is a structure. About 10 years ago, they mapped about 8,000 galaxies in relative position to see where they're moving, to see if there's any groups of galaxies that were traveling together. And sure enough, there was one. They call it Lacey, and it's a collection of 4 superclusters of stars. Represents around about 100,000 galaxies stretched over 520 million light years. Massive structure, like a filament in the stars. And that's actually how the stars cluster. They cluster due to gravity. You may have heard of that. It pulls things together so that the stars form in clusters. If you zoom out again, you get the local superclusters. Again, massive structures of hundreds of thousands of galaxies. And between them, though, there's these voids. Right? There's pockets of like nothing. And the pockets are unimaginably huge because, again, gravity has pulled together the galaxies into these huge clusters. And so sometimes they're called walls because you can't see through them. And so there's various spaces in space where we can't see through. We know there's a big cluster there. We can't see beyond it because there's so many so closely together. But if you can zoom out one more time, and it starts looking like this. This is, again, not perfect because this is on the edge where we can start to see, but this is the current estimate of stars, 200 billion trillion stars. There's a technical word for it, of course. It's 1 septillion. So between 1 and 2 septillion stars out there. Space is big. Space is really big. The heavens declare the glory of God. The sky displays his handiwork. Day after day it speaks out. Night after night it reveals his greatness. There is no actual speech or word, nor is its voice heard, but its voice echoes throughout the earth, its words carried to the distant horizons. Many of us, in this room, we're like, yeah, I get it. In fact, most people would say, hey, the universe is amazing. We agree. But many folks would then counter well, but hasn't science totally disproving God anyway? So what does it matter the universe is so amazing? And this is one of the ways I think people have been so misled. Personally, myself, I was misled back in my public school education about the nature of the universe. There's a couple questions that we didn't ask that would have been really important questions. In fact, the truth of God being needed was discovered, was thought about, was reasoned out by some of the earliest scientists. They would have called themselves philosophers. They were Greeks. They knew that there was a problem with this. In fact, let me suggest to you that your 4-year-old, or you when you were 4-year-old, was 4 years old, can identify the root problem here, okay? So bring out your 4-year-old mind for just a second, and let's talk Christmas cookies. Your 2-year-old, you, sees the cookies on the counter, and there's a chair nearby, and you're not present, and what do? They go get themselves a cookie, right? They're sliding chairs, they're climbing up, and they knock the cookie jar onto the ground, smash into 1,000 pieces. And so they look at that situation. Obviously, mom runs in, or dad runs in. It's probably dad, because mom would have been on top of that situation. But when dad runs in, he looks and sees, my dear child, I know what's happened. I can see the cookie crumbs on your shirt. I know that you broke the cookie jar, but what does the 2-year-old say? Not just I didn't do it. It just happened, right? Just something happened, and suddenly the cookies are on the floor. I don't know what happened, right? So that's the 2-year-old response is I don't know what happened, mysteries happened, right? Whereas the 4-year-old's a little bit different. The 4-year-old says, I didn't do it. The 4-year-old knows that something happened, right? I didn't do it, but something happened. The 2-year-old just says, I don't know what happened, but the cookies are down. And it's what you're learning about, what the 2-year-old doesn't understand, that the 4-year-old does understand, is this little thing called cause and effect. Right? The 4-year-old realizes that for the cookie jar to fall down, that someone had to do something, whereas the 2-year-old just hasn't quite put that together yet. Okay, and that's how it works. And this basic concept of cause and effect, they figured that out a couple thousand years ago, that effects have causes, that there's a correlation there. They don't just poof disappear, or they don't poof just appear. That's not the way this world works. An intellectual person, a philosopher, this is what they would call it. This is the word of the day. It's causality. Okay, it's the relationship between cause and effect, that effects have causes, and it's this so basic principle in science and every other subject of philosophy, that everything has a cause. Everything has a cause. And we experience in so many different, it really is answering this fundamental question of the 4-year-old, right? It's the question, why? Why is the sky blue? There's a reason why the sky is blue. We could go into the details. I'm going to skip that one this morning, but you could answer, why is there a rainbow? Why can't I eat 15 cookies? Right? There's a connection between, there's a reason why, there's a reason for everything, okay? Why do I have to eat my Brussels sprouts? When you get a little bit older, they get harder, like, why can't I see God? Or why does this universe exist? That question is so important. The why is so important. And we've been asking these questions for a long time. We formalized it. You kind of think of it mathematically. X causes Y. And the big question is, well, what caused X, right? And, well, it's W, obviously. But you can keep going for a while and eventually get to the beginning of the alphabet, and you have a little problem, right? Because A leads to B, but what leads to A? And we have a problem, right? And there's a couple different ways you hear that talked about. My favorite way is my dear friend here, Aristotle, my chicken and the egg. And we talk about it as kids, right? Your 6-year-olds are probably talking about this, like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? We understand that this is a problem, okay? And science recognizes that this is a problem, okay? We have ideas, but fundamentally, you have to be able to solve this problem to understand how this universe works. If you don't understand the solution to this problem, you don't really understand how the universe works. Something caused it. What came first? Okay? There's a couple proposed solutions floating around there, okay? The first is what's called the causal loop. Now, I'm not talking about the chicken here. I'm talking about the universe, okay? Most Eastern religions teach a causal loop. They say the universe as it is has always existed and will always continue to exist. That's why they believe in reincarnation, that you are just, hey, it's your next time around the cycle. And in Hinduism, for instance, you are trying to make sure that you do things right so your karma increases so that your next time through the loop that things go better for you. Okay, that's all of Hinduism in a nutshell right there. Other Eastern religions are different. Buddhism, for instance, you're trying to get out of the loop because the loop is just more suffering, just going around that. And so you're trying to get out of the loop in Buddhism. But that's how the Eastern mind works, is that there's just this big loop, right? It's always been. The universe has always existed, and we're just trying, whatever we're trying to do with the loop, but it's just one big loop. But there's a problem with that theory. You know what the problem with that theory is? It doesn't match the data. It doesn't match the data because everything, when we go up and look at all the stars, they're all moving a direction, but if you go backwards in time, they coalesce at a single point. It had a beginning. You can't have a loop if you have a beginning, okay? And I've heard some people try to suggest there's a solution to this problem. Perhaps you've seen this idea of the big crunch. This is the theory that, hey, the universe began the Big Bang and it's expanding, which is where we're at now, but eventually it'll turn around and start shrinking, and then finally a big crunch. And the theory is, well, once it crunched, then it'll just loop back and start again with another Big Bang. I've heard this by so many people say, hey, this is the solution to causality, that there was just one crunch after bang after the next. But there's a problem with this. I don't know if most of you probably haven't even heard of this before, but if you have seen the big crunch loop idea, there's some science problem with this too. It actually gave the discoverers of this solution, or the problem of this, won a Nobel Prize in 2011. Two groups independently discovered that the universe is not only expanding, but it's accelerating in the expansion. So most folks believe that due to gravity, that, hey, imagine the explosion, and it goes out for a while, but then slowly, eventually gravity's slowing it down, and then it start, that was the theory. Everyone just assumed that was how the universe worked. Deals with causality, no problem. However, and again, the Nobel Committee highlighted this last little detail here. The discovery came as a complete surprise even to the laureates themselves. They were shocked. And what they did is they measured a whole bunch of supernovas. We go into the details, but there was a problem, is that the universe is expanding, and it's expanding faster and faster and faster. There's no sign of it ever crunching. There's no data. There's nothing that points to crunch. Everything points to bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is a problem. In fact, you've probably heard the solution to this problem by scientists. Have you ever heard of dark energy or dark matter? Heard that phrase before? It's kind of obscure. People say that like, oh, you're supposed to know what dark matter is or something. You should go look it up on the NASA website sometime. It's a fascinating reading, what dark energy and dark matter is. But let me give you the quick version of it. It's what happens when you don't know what the answer is, okay? Okay, it's dark, meaning astronomers can't find it, they can't see it, they don't observe it. We have no evidence for it at all. So it's dark, meaning you can't see it. Because we look out there at the heavens and we see the universe is expanding. It's expanding faster and faster, and they run the numbers. It's like, this doesn't work, and so they put in a fudge factor, and it's called dark energy and dark matter. And this is the hard thing. Let me read this little statement. It says, more is unknown than known. What we know about dark energy there is because we know how it affects the universe's expansion. Okay, something's there. Other than that, it's a complete mystery. But it's an important mystery because it turns out that roughly 68% of the universe is dark energy, and dark matter makes up 27%. The rest, everything on Earth, everything ever observed with all of our instruments, all normal matter, adds up to less than 5% of the universe. I don't know if you can catch that claim there. I learned something in my college physics class. If I get a 5%, I don't pass, okay? But basically what they're saying here is that if we science the best of it, we can only explain 5% of what's happening. The other 95%, we have no idea. We have no idea how this all works. We've been trying to figure things out. But the naturalist, the person who's relying on science, is sitting pretty at like 5% to start with. If they pass everything, they're at 5%. And they have even a bigger problem. Okay, not only do they only explain for 5% of what's happening, but there's a bigger problem, okay? And the problem is, again, it's the chicken and the egg problem. It's causality. The Big Bang, this is the data. There appears like there was a Big Bang. The universe is expanding. It's accelerating in expansion. We can explain only 5% of it. But there's a really huge problem there. And the problem is, why? What caused it? And here's a massive problem, because science cannot tell you what the answer to that is, categorically. I don't know if you understand that, but the point of a Big Bang is it's a singularity, that everything that ever existed was in one single point. Mathematically, it's not possible to investigate anything prior to that point. So science is not only, it's not that it doesn't know the answer, it's that it's not possible for it to know the answer. Do you see the distinction between those things? Like, one thing is we don't know because we don't know, but we can't possibly know. The naturalist has no way of possibly knowing what caused it. It's a faith position. And so that's a faith position. I have a faith position as well, but there's no evidence, there's no conversation you could ever have about why. It's not answerable. And in public school, they never mention that. They never mention that, oh, there's a massive problem here with causality. We don't know what caused it, and it's not possible to know. And so as we sit today, we have no evidence or any causal loops. There's tons of evidence that there was an initial creation. There's a point in space where it all happened. And we categorically cannot use any empirical science to do any studying of that point or what happened before then. Okay? The ancient Greeks figured all that out a long time ago, though. Okay? They figured out that there was a huge problem here, and they thought about the causality problem. You don't need a telescope to figure out that everything has a cause, okay? That they figured that out. And so this is what Aristotle, one of the great Greek scientists, philosophers, this is his conclusion, which is rather shocking because this is 500 BC. There must be an immortal, unchangeable being ultimately responsible for all wholeness and orderliness in the sensible world. He called it the unmoved mover. He didn't believe in infinite regression where there was always something. He didn't believe in the causality loop. And so he concluded that there was some entity, some being, he didn't name names, but he thought there was something out there that had to kick it off. Okay, and he developed a whole philosophy around it. In modern language, we would call a transcendental first cause. It's not often we get to use that word properly, but it means a cause that is no connection to this physical world. Okay, it's transcendental. The fascinating thing is the Greeks even had a word for a first cause, what one of these things would be called. They had a word for it. Aristotle didn't use it, but some of his peers did. It's the Greek word logos. Oh, I'm skipped too far ahead. Let's not do that. Let's go back here. No. Oh, logos, here we go. Which is incidentally very fascinating to me as a biblical scholar, because this word logos, or it's translated as word or reason, it's used in the scriptures quite a bit. In fact, most famously in John chapter 1. So let me read this. I'm not translating, I'm just leaving it as logos, because it's word or reason or this first cause. It says, in the beginning was the logos, and the logos was with God, and the logos was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him, and apart from him, not even one thing came into being which has come into being. And a couple of verses later, then the logos became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory. Glory is the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. And I hope that you don't miss John's assertion here, right? That all things came into being through him, through the logos, through the first cause. I don't think that it was random that he used that word. He's tying in the Greek understanding that there was a cause for everything, and he's saying that God was that cause. Okay, that's what John's letting us know. Like, that's what John's believing about Jesus, that he was the cause. And so let me assert to you that the heavens themselves agree with both the Psalms, but they also agree with John, that God is the first cause, that all things came into being through him. The heavens point to a creator. Honestly, the heavens are screaming it out at us. We just don't seem to listen very often, but there is a creator. And the same creator God who created everything took on human flesh and dwelt among us. And that's what we celebrate during Christmas. God taking on flesh and dwelling among us in the person of Jesus. The Logos became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. And this is what we celebrate here on this Advent, this Christmas season, of Jesus' entry into this world in that manger. Okay, so to summarize, one of my favorite little quotes here: the first gulp from the glass of the natural sciences will turn you into an atheist. That was certainly me. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And that's what I've discovered myself. Okay, a couple takeaways from all this morning. Number one, and do not miss this. Number one, open your eyes and see the Creator. It doesn't matter if you look at the stars, look at the lights. You can look at the clouds, the sunrise, the sunset. Everything on this world is created, and we look at it and we think, man, this is beautiful. Why is it beautiful? You know what random noise looks like, right? This is not random. This is created. There's intent, there's purpose, there's beauty, there's reasons for these things. Open our eyes and let us see the world around us. We live here in the Northwest. You can't help but see the beauty of creation all around us. But it's screaming out at us, there is a Creator. There is a Creator.